Hi, I am Cory Lee, and today we are excited for a new episode of Access All Areas. Here at Hunt Discover, we have interviewed some really great influencers and change makers over the past couple of months, and today is no different. So today, I'm really excited to talk with Carrie-Anne Lightley. She is a accessible travel blogger. She's traveled all around the UK and Europe, and it's going to be a really fun conversation. So I can't wait to talk to her. So Carrie-Anne, how are you? Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Corey. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah,
And also to chat to you because we've chatted over email and social media for years and years, but never actually managed to chat virtually in person, as it were. So I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.
yeah, it's so good to finally be able to chat with you, like outside of email. So this is great, and I can't wait to hear more about your story and some of your travels. But first, I would love to just learn more about you. If you can tell us about who you are, about your blog. If you can start with that, that would be great.
Of course, yeah. So I'm Carrie-Anne Lightley. I'm based in the UK, in the Lake District, which is in the north of the UK, in the sort of countryside, I suppose. Um, I have been blogging now on and off for probably coming up 10 years. I My background is in accessible travel. I've always worked within the field of accessibility and used to work for an organization that focused on specifically travel and tourism. And that really gave me an outlet. We had a newsletter where often I would write articles and people would be. I got invited by the Scottish Tourist Board to go and do what we would call a familiarisation trip now, and go and have a bit of a tour and write about it in the newsletter afterwards. And the articles were so well received that I decided at that time to launch a blog. And this was back when a blog was really a diary. A blog certainly wasn't a business at that time. It certainly wasn't something that you could make an income from or anything like that. So I just launched on Blogger and just, would write about a trip when I'd been there and post some photographs. And then way back, I think probably about 5 years ago now, I took the decision to sort of turn that into a bit more of a side hustle, launch my own platform on CarrieAnnLightley.com, and that's where you'll find my blog today. So there's all kinds of different articles covering places that I've travelled to, also covering kind of my top tips for travel, some opinion pieces, and then last year I ran a series on venues reopening post-COVID and what kind of measures that they put in place to protect disabled travellers. So yeah, lots and lots of information available.
Awesome. Yeah, I was checking out your blog yesterday again, just as a refresher before this interview. And I mean, you have some really great information on there, a lot of tips, and even like accessible city guides. So there are accessible guides to places like Barcelona, all over Europe. I mean, a ton of really great information on there. So if anyone is listening today or watching and wants to find out about a destination, definitely check out CarrieAnnLightley.com. And I'm sure you've got information on there about any destination that they're wanting to go to. So we'll definitely get back into traveling in just a bit. But first, I would love to ask you about your disability. What disability do you have, and how did you join the disability community?
Of course, yeah. So I have cerebral palsy, which means that I use a wheelchair most of the time. I can sort of mobilize independently in the house, but other than that, I would be using a wheelchair. I sometimes use a manual chair, sometimes use a power chair, sometimes use a manual chair with a power pack, all depending on where I'm going and what I'm doing. So as I said, cerebral palsy, which means that I have always been disabled. So I have, I suppose, always been part of that community, but it wasn't really until I started working in this area in accessibility that I really started strongly identifying as disabled and feeling like a part of that community.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of the same for me also. I mean, when I got into my 20s, I started like reaching out into the disability community and making friends with other people with disabilities and became a part of the community. So unfortunately, when I was younger, I didn't know too many people with disabilities in my community, but as I got older, I did. So kind of similarities right there for us, I think.
I think the same for me, and I think it's a journey that you have to go on. It's something that you have to grow through. I think, I'm sure that it must be quite different for people who acquire a disability,
Oh
but
yeah,
for me and for other people that I talk to who have always been disabled, we sort of go on this journey where, throughout maybe our teenage years, we really shun anything to do with disability because we just want to fit in and we just want to be like everybody else. And then, something happens later on in life where we think actually, being me and being uniquely who I am is a real strength, and I want to be able to utilize that. So yeah, that was very much the journey that I went on.
yeah, amazing. And I know that in addition to your blog, you are also the head of marketing for a company called AccessAble. So can you please tell us how that job started and a bit about that company?
Of course, yeah. So I started working for AccessAble almost 3 years ago now. So as I say, I previously worked for a charity that specialised in tourist information for disabled people. I worked there for a very long time, for about 13 years. Um, I had a couple of things happen in my life that really forced me to sort of take stock of where I was and what I wanted my future to look like. And that coincided with AccessAble reaching out to me and offering me a role with them. So it was really one of those kind of stars aligning moments. And I thought I've got to go for this and I've got to give it a try and see how I get on. So I joined as marketing manager 3 years ago. Um, I can see that you shared the web address there, so that's great. So the website is free for anybody to access. And what we do at AccessAble is we produce very detailed accessibility information to all different types of venues all across the UK and Ireland. So could be a pub or a restaurant, a hospital, a tourist attraction, a university, lots and lots of different venue types. Some of them travel focused and some of them more focused on local experience. And crucially, all of the information is collected by a trained surveyor who goes and visits the venue, notes down all the facts and figures, takes measurements, takes photographs, and then that gets turned into what we call an access guide. So we collect about 1,000 pieces of information per venue that we visit. So as you can imagine, it does result in a lot of detail, from anything like, where the accessible parking is, what the lighting levels are like, what the background noise is like, if there's an accessible toilet, and lots more. And they're all available for anybody to view on the website. And also there's a free app that can be downloaded on iOS and Android.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, over 1,000 pieces of information per attraction. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge amount of detail, and I think currently we have about 70,000 venues live on the
Wow.
website, covered across the UK. And then I was fortunate enough in February this year to have the opportunity to step up to head of department, so head of marketing, which was really exciting for me. I'll be honest, not something that I was expecting or that I'd planned, but again, when life throws you these curveballs, I think you've often
Yeah.
just got to embrace it and see how it goes. So that means that I'm now sort of fully responsible for everything that we do in marketing, and our overall aim is to grow the amount of people that are viewing our information so that we can help as many disabled people as possible.
Awesome, man. Just because I'm curious, how do you manage like your blog and also, this new job as the head of marketing at AccessAble. How are you finding that balance right now?
Yeah, so it's definitely a difficult balance. It's definitely tricky, and I have not mastered it. I have there's been a lot of difference in it over the years and in how the balance has gone. When I first joined, I was doing a lot of just weekend trips in the UK. So I would literally like finish work at 3 o'clock on a Friday, get straight on the road, go and do the trip, come home on a Sunday night, start work again on Monday, and then try and find time in the evenings to write up my experience and publish it on the blog. And I did that quite intensely for about 6 months, and then realised that it wasn't working. That I just wasn't getting enough downtime, enough free time, and it was taking the pleasure out of the process for me. To be honest, everything just felt very work.
Yeah.
So I decided just to take a bit of a break from blogging so intensely and just focus on, quality over quantity, writing when I had a particular trip to write about, and also learning how to say no, learning,
Mm.
and I'm sure that you feel the same thing, that we are incredibly privileged to have so many invitations to go and visit and stay at places and write
Oh yeah.
about places. But particularly as a blogger, as one person, it's just impossible to do it
Yeah.
all,
Oh
whether
yeah.
you've got a job or not. So,
I have a
um,
hard time. I definitely have a hard time saying no, but
yeah,
I think I've started finally learning how to like say no to opportunities. And
absolutely. So there's been a bit of that. There's been a bit of that, and then obviously, along came a pandemic,
yeah,
which meant that I couldn't travel. I had some time away from AccessAble work last year because of the pandemic, and that meant that I could spend some time focusing on the blog and focusing on background stuff,
right.
SEO, and all the really
Yeah,
exciting stuff that comes with being a webmaster. Um, and then, work got busy again. I took on this new role, so I've just sort of said, right now, I'm just taking a bit of a break. It's not forever, and the blog will come back, but the blog will come back as I naturally start to travel again.
yeah,
And it'll probably be that focus on quality over quantity again. It's it's impossible for me to work full time and also keep to a schedule of publishing a blog post every week or every fortnight or even every month.
oh,
But um, so I kind of go against the rules a bit there. I know everybody says that you have to keep a regular content schedule to keep your readers
yeah.
engaged and a loyal audience and everything, but that hasn't necessarily been the case for me. I've dipped in and out of it quite a lot, and I've had some times where I haven't been posting on my Facebook page, for example, for a
Yeah.
couple of months. And then I'll post, and actually I'll just get just as much engagement as I would have done before, because I'm
Mm.
fortunate that I have a small audience, but an engaged audience.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I
That-
think in a nutshell, it's definitely not perfect balance.
yeah.
It's a tricky balance, but it's just about, working out how it all fits into your life and being able to say, no, I'm human and I can't do all of that. And that
Right.
is okay.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that. I mean, on my blog, I've always kind of thought, I should be posting at least once or twice a week, new blog posts and doing daily social updates. But in the past, like 6 months, I've kind of been sporadic with how much I'm posting on the blog. But at HuntDiscover, we do publish a new blog post every week. So that is very dependable every week. But me personally, on my personal blog, it's kind of all over the place sometimes. But good to know that you're kind of the same, and not we don't have to be on every Thursday this is going up. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely gone through that. I've definitely been in that headspace where
Yeah,
I've tried to make that work, and I think ultimately it just doesn't make me happy.
yeah,
It's not enough of a balance to give me the kind of life that I want, because too much focus gets, it's I think it's really easy to not see how much work goes into a blog behind the
yeah.
sins,
Oh
even
yeah.
without the writing and the traveling. Um, so yeah, I think it's about being comfortable with saying, do you know what? I'm not a perfect blogger. I don't do things how everybody else does them, but that's all right. I'm happy with that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I've really enjoyed talking all about blogging, but I would love to get back into traveling now. That's probably why a lot of people are tuning in. So I know you've had some incredible travels, and we know that traveling as a wheelchair user, it is challenging at times, no doubt about it. But what, despite the challenges, inspired you to travel and try to see as much of the world as possible?
I think what inspires me to travel is that, so often as disabled people, traveling means getting out of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
It means, letting go of our wheelchairs and not knowing what state they're going to come back to us in. It means
Right.
sometimes or possibly often going to a destination where you're not actually 100% sure if it's going to be accessible to you when you get there. And all of that is quite scary. It produces anxiety. It gives you
Oh,
a
yeah.
reason to worry. But to get on the other side of that and to be in a new place where you've never been before, just, I don't know, sitting and overlooking the ocean with a cocktail, or, I remember this moment sitting on a rooftop bar overlooking Rome and just
Mhm.
thinking, well, we've got here. We've done all of that. We've got
Yeah.
through all of the bad stuff and we've got here. And that is amazing. And it's
Oh,
just, I think it's such an empowering feeling to be able to say, there were so many barriers in my way. There were so many things to worry about. There were so many reasons not to. Because as you say, travel as a wheelchair user is hard.
yeah.
But even despite all of that, I pushed myself and I did it and I got here, and that feels really good. And I think ultimately that's what drives me as a person to travel.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, it's always like super rewarding once, we're finally in the destination, and despite everything, getting on the flight, dealing with air travel, which we both know is a debacle, no doubt about it as a
Yeah.
wheelchair user. But once you're finally there, I think it makes it all worth it. But what were some of the first destinations that you remember visiting as a wheelchair user? And what did you learn from those early experiences even?
Okay. So some of my very first independent travels as a wheelchair user, so sort of without my family, they were actually sort of like 1830s style. So the very first place I went was Magaluf in
Yeah.
Mallorca, which
Nice.
is sort of known for that kind of party, that kind of 1830s package tour type
Yeah.
thing. It's nowadays my absolute nightmare. But at the time, that was my vibe, and that was what I was into. And I I suppose what I learned from that, excuse me, was how difficult it can be to find accessible places to go and stay and visit if you're not looking at the correct channels.
Yeah.
Because at this time I didn't work in this area. I didn't know anything about accessible travel. I didn't even know that wheelchair accessible rooms existed. And so I just went and sat in a travel agent, and 2 hours later we were still sat in the travel agents
Yeah.
because even though we had a brief that was really easy to meet, it was so difficult for them to find the
Mhm.
suitable accommodation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I learned from that just how challenging accessible travel can be. Um, but I think what I'd like to talk about is some of the travels that I've had in the UK, and actually what they've taught me about travel along the way. So that picture you showed there is actually just really close to where I live. It's about a 20
Mhm.
minutes drive from my hometown, and it's a beautiful area of the Lake District. And in more recent years, I've done a lot more of that kind of traveling where, You know, I may have just gone somewhere that's, I don't know, half an hour's drive down the road, but it's somewhere that I've never been to before. And it's taught me to slow down when I travel and to appreciate the whole experience a little bit more. And, you know, I'm sure you've had these thoughts as well as a blogger and a content creator, is how much can I pack in? How many photos can I take that are going to end up on my Instagram feed?
Yeah.
How many opportunities to create content can I get out of this one trip?
Oh yeah.
And again, there just has to be a balance, doesn't there? Because, you know, you find yourself not actually appreciating your surroundings because you're so focused on yeah, squeezing it dry, I suppose, getting everything that you
Yeah.
can out of it. Whereas actually, you know, in certainly in more recent years, I've traveled slower. I've had weekends. I had a weekend towards the end of last year when it was safe to travel in the UK,
Yeah.
where I went to somewhere that was about an hour's drive from my house, and we literally stayed inside the cottage all weekend. You know, we didn't
Nice. Yeah.
leave. We ordered like shopping from local produce suppliers and went out for walks with the dog, and that was it. But it was lovely. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
so nice.
sometimes it's best to just like slow down and really take it in. I mean, I did the same thing throughout the pandemic. I would go to cabins and like national parks and
Mhm.
just take it slow, take it easy. I went to like an alpaca farm one
Oh,
weekend, which I
amazing.
would have never done otherwise. But
Yeah.
it really gave me a chance to slow down and enjoy it. And those were like some of my favorite trips ever. I mean, really. So yeah, totally understand where you're coming from. But since those early travel experiences that you talked about, do you think that traveling as a wheelchair user has improved since then? And what areas would you still like to see be improved?
Yeah, I think it has improved since then. I think there are more options open to us as wheelchair users. There are, you know, just simple things like having blogs, like your blog and my blog, that people can search for and read on the internet. That kind of information didn't exist when I first started traveling as a teenager. And yeah, and I do think the provision of information is probably the biggest thing for me, and it's probably the thing that I have seen improved, but also the thing that I would most like to see improve more.
Yeah,
Because um, you know, no matter what barriers are put in our way, if we have information about accessibility or lack thereof, then the decision is ours. We are empowered
mhm,
to go and do whatever we like without having to rely on somebody else telling us whether or not their venue is suitable for it.
right.
Because we're all different and we're all individual. And, you know, the fact that there are so many more websites and apps that we can search for this information on now can only be a good thing, because
Yeah,
that makes travel easier. You know, you and I know sometimes we get trips planned for us by, I don't know, a PR or a travel agency or something, and you know, that's quite nice because
yeah.
we can guarantee a certain level of accessibility, and it takes some of the work away from us, right?
Right.
But um but you know, there are times that I'm sure you as well, when you're researching your own trips, it can be really frustrating depending on the destination
Mhm.
to be able to find reliable information. And yes, I need a ramp to get through the door. You know, I need to be able to get in to your venue first and foremost, but I need to know if I am going to be able to get into your venue, ideally before I've left my home, so that I'm not
Mhm.
worrying about it. And so I think that has come a long way, but I do also think that there is so much room for improvement with the provision of accessibility information, and um, that it's such a simple thing, but that can ultimately break down so many barriers for disabled people in travel.
Yeah, exactly. I always say that the word accessible means something different to like every disabled person. Like
Yeah,
there's so many variations of it. So, if you can really, the more resources that are out there and the more accessible travel blogs, then the better, because we all have a different experience when we travel. So having more and more information can only help us all, I think. Yeah, I think
100%. Yeah.
yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that. And so now, what are some of your favorite experiences that you've had while traveling?
So, just so many. I mean, I did a wheelchair abseil a few
Oh,
years ago, which so I is it rappelling you call it in the
yeah,
US? I know it's a slightly different term. So I did that a few years ago, and that was one of those things that I would have never chosen to do.
yeah,
But a TV production company got in touch with me and said, we want to film something like this local to where you live. Could you come along? Yeah, yeah, no problem. Oh, by the way, do you want to do an abseil? Um, okay. Um, and that was one of those experiences where it was like, normally back then I might have got a little bit nervous of talking to a TV camera, but I was so nervous about the abseil that I didn't care about the interview.
right.
Um, and so I lived that. It was brilliant. That kind of, again, out of the box, out of your comfort zone
Yeah,
type experience. And I am grateful to my blog for that, because it's taken me to so many destinations that I wouldn't have otherwise chosen to go to. A couple of years ago, we went and stayed in a really remote cottage in South France, and my husband for the first time drove in Europe, and he'd never done that before. Again, it's probably not something that we'd look at doing, but afterwards we were like, oh, that was such a different trip. It was just such a different vibe, and we're so grateful to have been pushed to do that and have that experience. I mean, honestly, I feel like I enjoy every single one of my trips, and every one that I go on, I come home and think, oh wow, that was so different, and I want to travel like that
yeah,
more next time. And yeah, I am very grateful. And yeah, so many different experiences covered. I mean, loads and loads on my blog. You can see photos and articles about all of this stuff. But I think, yeah, to summarize that, it is often when I'm asked to do something that I'm not that comfortable with,
yeah,
but I kind of do it anyway for the purposes of, I don't know, the work, the article, whatever's going on, and then I find that I enjoy myself so much that I'm really glad that I did.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's always like the experiences that I think I'm most like scared of or nervous about that are
Yeah,
the best by far. I mean, I think it's important just to like push ourselves when we travel, especially just try to break out of your comfort zone a little bit, and you can have a remarkable trip and experience. Absolutely.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
and so you told us about some of your favorite experiences, but on the other hand, are there any experiences that stand out as not so great? And how did you handle those?
Yeah, so when my last trip, actually, my last trip pre-COVID, I was traveling from the UK to Portugal, and I just had a really bad flight experience, just a
Oh,
really bad assistance experience.
yeah.
Thankfully my equipment was okay, my wheelchair wasn't damaged or anything like that, but I was treated quite badly, and a lot of the issues, which were systematic issues, were sort of blamed on me as an
Um,
individual, and it was just really quite upsetting. It was just, if it had been communicated properly, it needn't have happened, basically. And because it did, it was quite upsetting. And it actually upset me because this trip was a holiday. It wasn't a blog trip. And I'm sure you need to take one of those every so often too, where you
oh
go, do you know what? I'm just going to go away, and I'm not going to write anything.
yeah.
And I'm just going to like switch off and
Yeah.
relax.
Well, I always say I'll do that, but then I end up writing about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I do that too sometimes. This one I was like, no, this is a holiday. And so that experience happened. Like I had this bad experience with the assistants, and then felt so much need to advocate not only for myself but for everybody else who might be in that situation. I thought, I'm supposed to be on holiday. Like, can I not just have one day off from activism and, you know, campaigning for accessible travel and all of that sort of stuff? It's just, it is frustrating, and I find communicating it quite difficult because I want to let people see the reality of accessible travel, and I want to raise awareness of that, but I don't want to put people off from traveling either,
Yeah.
because it won't stop me. You know, even though it was awful, and even though it was quite an upsetting experience, and even though it's probably quite likely to happen again, I will continue to travel
Yeah. Oh,
because
yeah. Yeah.
it's still worth it.
Yeah.
So,
We are the same. I mean, it's exact same. I feel you 100% on like pretty much everything you've said this whole interview. I'm having like we're really a lot alike.
amazing.
Yeah. And so what is your top tip for other travelers that use a wheelchair?
Wow, just one. That's gosh, what would my top tip be? I think, you know, it does come down to that research. That's the key to everything. Because yeah, you can't even begin to think about traveling as a wheelchair user until you know that where you're going is going to be accessible to you.
Right.
And to do that, you've got to do research. So my top tip would just be, you know, research as thoroughly as you can. Read accessible travel blogs. You know, follow people like us on Instagram and see what we're doing. Use websites like AccessAble and Hand Discover. I actually have a wheelchair accessible travel planner that can be downloaded from my blog. So if you actually just go onto my blog and click subscribe, it's sort of like a calendar planner document that you can download that will talk you through how I usually plan a trip as a wheelchair user. Obviously, it's going to be different for everybody. As we said, we've all got different needs. Accessible means something different to everyone, but that just gives you an insight into my planning process, and hopefully will support anybody else to plan their trips as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I want to check out that planner. I need that.
I don't think you do, Cory. I think you're.
Well, it might be good to see a different perspective, you
Yeah,
know, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah. I'll definitely download it after this. But
amazing.
one last question I wanted to ask you is, once this pandemic has completely finished and you're comfortable with traveling like internationally again, what is on the top of your bucket list?
So my dream bucket list trip was supposed to happen in March 2020.
Uh,
So I had been building up to this for years, and it
uh,
and it hadn't happened, and it hadn't happened for one reason or another. Life had kind of got in the way, and then it had to be cancelled because of COVID. So one of my best friends lives in Perth in Western Australia,
wow.
and so she emigrated. I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago now. And so we've always said, right, we need to go and visit. But obviously, if we're going to travel that far, if we're going to travel from the UK all the way over to Australia, we're going to need to combine a few different destinations, see a bit more of the world. So the plan was to go to Bali, then spend some time in Perth, and then spend some time in Singapore, and then come
Oh,
home. So if I could book that trip all over again,
yeah.
100% would do it. But I, as things stand in terms of pandemic and travel and things like that, I feel like that trip has to wait until we are as close to any kind of normality as possible. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's my
Yeah,
it's my big thing. It's my dream thing,
oh, yeah.
and I don't want to be worrying about viruses and vaccines and masks and all of those sorts of things while I'm taking that trip. So I think I'll probably start small in terms of international travel. I think I'll probably go back to a couple of destinations that I've been to already that I'm familiar with, that are like short haul flights, and then hopefully build up to that big dream bucket list trip again.
Yeah, that sounds like an incredible trip, and hopefully you'll be able to do it in the next couple of years. And I really hope everything will be back to normal. And we can all go to Australia. That would be incredible. So
Fingers crossed. I mean, how about you? You must have had a lot of travel cancelled because of the pandemic.
yeah, I was supposed to go to New Zealand like 2 weeks after
Oh, wow.
everything kind of shut down. And so that was like a big dream trip for me. And then also Japan was like one of my biggest dream trips. So quite a few trips canceled, but I think we're starting to get back to somewhat normal. So hopefully, eventually, we'll all be able to travel around the world and things can get back to normal, hopefully.
We
So,
can all meet up in Australia. We can
yeah,
have a disabled travellers Australia meetup.
I'm totally up for it. I'm ready.
Amazing.
And can you please just remind everyone where they can find you? And if there's anything else you want to add, feel free.
Of course. Yeah. So you can find my blog at CarrieAnneLightley.com. All my social channels are linked to from there. You can subscribe from there. And subscribing gets you that planner that we talked about earlier. And then just a quick shout out to AccessAble again. So you can find AccessAble site at accessable.co.uk. And you can download the free AccessAble app on iOS and Android. Just to say thank you so much for having me. I hope that everybody else has enjoyed our chat and that we can catch up again soon.
Yeah, it's been so great to talk with you, and I really appreciate you joining me today for this episode of Access All Areas. So thank you so much, Carrie-Ann, and hopefully I'll see you in real life eventually one day, hopefully in Australia.
I hope so. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Bye.
And thank you all so much for tuning in today. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you learned about some exciting accessible travel destinations and some good tips from Carrie-Anne Lightley. Definitely check out her blog at CarrieAnneLightley.com. And if you are in need of accessible accommodations for an upcoming trip, check out handdiscover.com, where we have thousands of accessible accommodations listed, along with accessibility details, and also a fantastic blog full of accessible travel information there on handdiscover.com. So until next time, I will be back in a few weeks with a new episode of Access All Areas with a very special guest. But until then, I hope you all have a great weekend. See you later.